Hi guys, welcome back to the channel with my good friend Dr. Mark Bull here today. Wanted to give you a little bit more in-depth look at how the body is moving in the swing. Mark is an expert in that realm. We're going to go through in depth today what is the trail shoulder doing in the swing and what components and focuses might you use to help you get better.
Thanks, Don. It's always a pleasure to spend time with you and be here today. So I think it's just providing that framework in some ways. You look at, say, the trail shoulder, there's always the exception,
yeah,
but often exceptions are exceptional, which is why they became an exception.
Yes.
You get these exceptional players, but you look at, say, the normative, the large demographic of advanced players, there are threads, different scales, different timings, but the kind of shoulder moves typically through the same movements through backswing in particular. So if you and I look, say, precisely today at how the trail shoulder moves through back and downswing, in essence, it will kind of go through as you move through backswing. And again, just to kind of provide the caveat, it's very much influenced by what the wrist does, what the forearm and elbow does, but looking just precisely at the shoulder joint and just acknowledge, we'll look at, say, for example, the head and neck, the rib cage, the hip, maybe in a different video.
Yeah.
So the shoulder will really go through kind of three very dominant movements through backswing. The idea, it will start to laterally or externally rotate as it moves through backswing. So loosely speaking, as we look at camera now, the hand is moving away from the shoulder in this definition. The arm or the forearm is rotating outwards. At the same time as it moves into something called AB abduction, the arm is actually moving away from the rib cage. So there's a coupled movement there between external rotation and AB abduction as the arm and shoulder then start to move into that very flex position. So flexion, hand reaching upwards. So that kind of very, could I say it's a four-dimensional move because it happens over time. The idea we externally rotate, we abduct and flex upwards would invariably be how the shoulder moves then through backswing.
So it's the blend of those three movements gets you into the top of backswing. So things that, and then when we're looking at the flexion of the shoulder, so some people that might be up here, yeah, they would have like a higher flexion reading, right?
Yeah, and typically it's like any ecosystem or something. Yeah. If you move more in that direction, you'll invariably move less in this direction. The more you take from that, the more you kind of give to this, that kind of approach. So you might find someone who has lots of, say, for example, shoulder flexion,
yes,
but it doesn't have, say, tremendous amounts of external or lateral rotation, or vice versa. Someone may have tons of, say, abduction,
yeah,
but then not much flexion. So it's that lovely interaction between the three. So like most things in anatomy, it's when you get a real dominance in one direction that it can be problematic. A bit there is fine, but it's when it's excessively here or excessively there, is often then less helpful.
Right, and just common things that I've seen when teaching players, like in the idea, and we talked about it in a previous video, staying connected. So if I stay connected, then I'm going to lose a bit of that abduction, right, in that backswing, right? If that's staying, and then I might try to replace it with more external. I'm probably not going to get much flexion either, so I'm probably going to just be focused on how much can it do that, because it can't really do anything else, correct?
Precisely. It gets very fixed, very rigid, almost a constraint in some ways. The idea of like things under the armpits, gloves, for example,
yeah,
are really just not helpful when it comes to exploring kind of good shoulder movement. And then I'm just looking then at how it moves in downswing. In some ways, Ty, we just invert that.
Yes.
So as we start to move in downswing, the arm will move downwards. So the arm is in essence, or the shoulder is extending downwards. The arm is then moving in that AD adduction direction. The arm is now moving back towards the midline.
Yes.
And it's also then moving towards a less externally rotated, doesn't move into internal rotation, it's just now less externally rotated. So for example, at impact, invariably you often see the rib cage is more rotated than the arm. So it's still in a level of external rotation, but on a much, much smaller level than it was at the top of backswing. So it's moving towards internal rotation without actually going into an internally rotated direction.
Love it. And then just one thing that we've talked about before, if I'm able to do this movement well, when I get to the top of backswing, now I've created a bit more stretch sort of through the pec, and that's going to allow me when I transition to help that, you know, energy production and things like that, versus if I don't allow that movement, then I'm going to be really restricted and obviously find some other way to produce energy, correct?
For sure. The idea of kind of rebound or recoil,
yes,
you say, kind of muscle physiology that really the closure rate, the rebound, the elasticity we experience in downswing is very much influenced by that, how those tissues are linked in through backswing, how we expand through that shoulder through backswing, what then tremendously influences then its ability to rebound and recoil and produce, in essence, those very high kind of forces and club speeds.
Yeah, so like thinking about just another example of like throwing, if this was really tight, it would be much harder to create that big stretch and big elastic recoil and energy in that transition.
Absolutely true.
So use that, guys. Use that guidance. Again, using a mirror, but just having an understanding where if you're lacking one of those movements or aren't going into it, potentially could be how you move. But lots of times if we're able to blend those three, a lot safer on the body, a lot easier to produce energy. Hope that helps you get better at this great game. Thank you, Dr. Mark Bull, for going through that with us.
My pleasure, Ty. Thank you.
Awesome.